How's it going, guys? JP here. Welcome back to another mixed martial arts related video. Of course, this series is kind of documenting my experience going through the UFC events from the very beginning. We are currently on UFC 6, subtitled Clash of the Titans. And the idea behind this is to get more familiar with the sport, learn more of the history, kind of see the early stuff that I'm not familiar with too much. And of course, UFC 6 took place July 14th, 1995. And it also is, we have the first appearance, I don't know if it's the only appearance, but we do have an appearance of Michael Buffer as the announcer, and does a fantastic job. Way better than what we're used to seeing. This also brings back the super fight. This is the second super fight, and it takes place right before the tournament final, and it features Ken Shamrock versus Dan the Beast Severn. And first up, there were two alternate bouts not broadcasted on the DVD, and that is Joel Sutton versus Jack Mclaughlin. Sutton defeats Mclaughlin due to submission punches. And then the second alternate bout was Anthony Macias defeating Ali Gibson, submission punches also. So those are our two alternate bouts. So first up in the quarterfinal bouts, we have the first appearance of David Tank Abbott as he fights John Matua. This fight didn't last very long, about 20 seconds. Tank Abbott really goes in there and just is way more of a superior striker, and he's just, you know, wild punches, but he's connecting with a lot of them. After the first punch that Tank Abbott lands, John Matua pretty much never has anything to offer. He's pure defense mode after that, and Tank just, you know, keeps throwing punches until he lands, you know, a really clean one, drops Matua, and finishes up with I believe it was a right hand, and just stiffens up John Matua. Now Tank Abbott really is kind of an asshole, for lack of a better term. After he wins, he kind of mocks Matua's stiffening up stance as he's, you know, knocked out, and just, you know, he's kind of a bad guy from early on, and he continues that throughout the tournament. The second fight then features Paul the Polar Bear Vorlons versus Cal Worsham. Now this fight was a pretty good one, you know. Worsham being the much smaller guy, I think Paul Vorlons is around 6'8", and Worsham is the much faster fighter and lands a lot of clean strikes, but you know, is getting out of the way of Paul Vorlons' shots, and Cal Worsham definitely is, you know, hitting Paul Vorlons with a lot of you know, shots, and he's definitely the faster fighter. He's landing a lot. But Paul Vorlons, you know, it looks like anytime he even touches Cal Worsham, you know, it definitely has an effect. So Paul Vorlons eventually, after, you know, getting tagged up a bit, lands a couple of elbows to the back of the head, you know, like downward elbows, and the second one really just knocks out Cal Worsham. So Paul Vorlons wins that fight. And then we have a returnee, Patrick Smith, fighting Rudyard Macio. And Patrick Smith definitely looks better than he has in his previous UFC events. I think he was in UFC 1 and 2. He shows a bit more of his grappling, and he comes right out and kind of push kicks his opponent, and, you know, kind of knocks him down, and then it's a bit of some scrambles, and eventually Pat Smith gets the rear naked choke of sort, and he wins that fight, but he does not continue into the semifinals, which is kind of a not so good thing. Of course, then we have Oleg Tatarov fighting Dave Beneteau. Tiktarov, of course, was in the previous UFC 5, and then Dave Beneteau was in the finals of UFC 5. Beneteau actually, you know, comes out strong, lands some strikes, but eventually Tiktarov gets him in a guillotine after a scramble and gets the victory. So that moves on to the semifinals, and we have Tank Abbott versus Paul Vorlons. This one, Tank Abbott kind of uses a bit of grappling, gets Vorlons to the ground, and just kind of lands some strikes, uses his knee and the fence to kind of do some sort of choke. Eventually lands enough strikes to have Big John stop the fight. Vorlons isn't super excited about that. I do like Vorlons, you know, he's just a big guy, he's kind of scary. All these guys in this event are just, you know, big, tough, scary dudes. But I was surprised by the amount of grappling technique that Tank Abbott did have. It was kind of impressive, he wasn't really expecting that. And then Oleg Tiktarov fights a alternate in Anthony Macias because Pat Smith cannot continue. It was a pretty quick fight. Oleg pretty much just gets the guillotine choke very early in the fight, 9 seconds I believe. So we have Tank Abbott versus Oleg Tiktarov in the finals. Now all of these guys seem a bit winded by the end, and so then we move on to the super fight, which is Ken Shamrock versus Dan Severn. This is a really fun fight here, definitely more exciting than the last super fight, and Dan Severn, of course, was the ultimate, you know, the UFC 5 champion, tournament champion, and Ken Shamrock drawed Royce Gracie in the super fight, long, boring super fight. This one is more grappling. They both showcase some grappling. Ken Shamrock does some striking, and eventually he does end up catching Dan Severn in a guillotine choke because Severn goes for a double leg and kind of leaves his neck wide open. So Ken Shamrock is our first super fight champion. And then that leads us to the finals, which is Oleg Tiktarov versus Tank Abbott. Most of this fight ended up with Tank Abbott in Oleg Tiktarov's guard, but Tank Abbott does land some strikes. He just completely gasses out and just lays on Tiktarov most of the fight. Both of them are completely exhausted, and eventually it gets stood back up. Tank throws some more strikes, and Tiktarov kind of catches him in a guillotine. He doesn't get it, but then he does end up getting his back and getting a rear naked choke. So Oleg Tiktarov is our UFC 6 tournament champion. I did really enjoy this whole event. I think that it was a very strong event. It might be my favorite thus far. It's not really that technical, but there's a lot of finishes, a lot of big guys. Tank Abbott is just fun to watch, and Tiktarov is also fun to watch. All these fights were pretty good, and except for the last fight was a bit underwhelming because of the long drawn out, I believe it was like 14 minutes or so, and before Tiktarov got to the submission, and Tank Abbott was really just too winded to put up a good fight in the finals. So that is UFC number 6. It is a solid event. I think it's my favorite thus far. So I'll see you guys next time in UFC 7.